to each other in silence. And so Jo really gave you the information, and she really is. If you can fight in with her, she will change your life. Jo is a wonderful woman, and I'm proud to be there because you met another woman who is deaf also. She's a wonderful woman. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. You'll have 2 more chances. I'd like to invite to the stage now the very best singing duo on the planet. Without question.
Absolutely. Sing when you want to. That's what I always do. Get in front of them or behind them. This song will be easier to sing. It's in Southern English. All right. I'm gonna sing you a brand new song. The song that's true for sure. Can't get by, we get high, get on the other side, Joe. Pull off your good sleeve, Joe, and my heart will be traveling. Pull off your good sleeve, Joe, and my heart will be traveling, I believe. Public schools and highways racing quite alarm. You get a country man, you get just a little, and you ain't gonna work on the farm. Pull off your good sleeve, Joe, and my heart will be traveling. Pull off your good sleeve, Joe, and my heart will be traveling, I believe. I don't know, but I think I'm right. The old rule of the country. Let's get back to the horse and buggy and try to save some money. Pull off your good roll-up sleeve, Joe, and then my heart will travel. Pull off your good roll-up sleeve, Joe, and then my heart will travel, I believe. I know many evangelists, everything's always full. People will come from miles around just to hear me shoot the bull. Pull off your good roll-up sleeve, Joe, and then my heart will travel. Pull off your good roll-up sleeve, Joe, and then my heart will travel, I believe. You talk about your evangelist, you talk about misfortune. Well, Henry Shakespeare, hell out of folks and all the evangelists do. Pull off your good roll-up sleeve, Joe, and then my heart will travel. Pull off your good roll-up sleeve, Joe, and then my heart will travel, I believe. I lived in the east, I lived in the west, I lived in Oregon. I lived 10 years in the Hornet's nest, and I never got stung by any. Pull off your good roll-up sleeve, Joe, and then my heart will travel. Pull off your good roll-up sleeve, Joe, and then my heart will travel, I believe. Gonna rain 40 nights, gonna rain 40 days, gonna rain on the Allegheny Mountains. Gonna rain for the horses and the Dominican mules, gonna take us on the other side of Jordan. Pull off your good roll-up sleeve, Joe, and my heart will travel. Pull off your good roll-up sleeve, Joe, and my heart will travel, I believe. Pull off your good roll-up sleeve, Joe, and my heart will travel. Pull off your good roll-up sleeve, Joe, and my heart will travel, I believe. Pull off your good roll-up sleeve, Joe, and my heart will travel. Pull off your good roll-up sleeve, Joe, and my heart will travel, I believe. Joe, and my heart will travel, I believe. Yeah, I wore these breeches because I didn't have cowboy boots. Okay? Thank you. And this is Jo Carson Red. I
for sure. I remember her pants are this color, and as luck would have it, I had a pair. We'll see soon, won't we? Jo Carson was forever giving things to people. And I've since come to learn, I met her 30 years ago, and I've since come to learn that by giving, you don't matter. You know, whatever this is just doesn't matter. And isn't that the goal? You know, and I was living in Memphis in 1981, and I needed to come home. I didn't know that yet. I needed to come home, and the road company called me and said, come back. We've got a play that Jo Carson wrote called Little Chicago, and we need somebody to tour it. Well, she gave me that role, in a sense. She gave me, I don't remember who I played, I don't remember his name, but I rode an airplane, acted like I was flying an airplane, and I felt like I was flying. By the first 2 weeks of the road company, I wallered on the floor. I learned what it meant to, well, I don't even know what to, but boy did I learn. And then there was a time or two when I needed a place to stay. She gave me that. I stayed in her house. I stayed in the don't burn down the house for a time, and it was in the middle of winter, but boy was that house warm, you know. Sammy and I needed a place to live in around 1990, and she essentially said, come to Aftermath, the Carson house, the Carson home. Sally Pat had been living there, and she had gotten sick, and Sammy and I moved into that house as if we were Carsons. And it was magical, a magical place. I drove by it just the other day. It's still magical. But one of the best things that she ever gave me was the Catron women. Jo, her mama, and her grandmother. And I met her grandmother once when I first moved to Johnson City, and Marie and Jo and Ella were sitting there, and Jo said, Grandmother, I want you to meet Eugene. He's just moved here to Johnson City. He's with the road company. And Ella gave me this. That was as much as I ever got. But I got to play Ella twice in front of people. And the Catron women, those stories in Day Trips, those beautiful stories of what it means to move through the dirt of this earth. And if you eat souse meat, you know what moving through the dirt of this earth means. After I played Grandma, she lived in my shoulder for about 3 years, literally, you know. I was living in New York, and I moved back, and I said, I went to chiropractors, I went to everybody to try to figure out what that was. And finally I figured out that it was not only Joe's grandma, but my grandma too, and I needed to do some talking and get a good chiropractor. But I wrote this little piece. Prophets, mystics, these have become very personal words. Public discourse doesn't allow for these thoughts anymore. We think of mystics as ancient. Few consider the possibility of a modern mystic. Even the word wisdom seems archaic. I think A.P. Carter was a mystic. And Jo Carson. I can think of no better way to describe you. Mystics dig in the same clay that we walk on and inhabit and see through the form. A mystic sees through the pattern of trouble, the patterns of ecstasy. A mystic knows where the light comes from and leads us to the source. Sometimes the mystic is so far away in time that it's hard to look at our lives through their words and thoughts. And that's why we were blessed to have you, Jo. It's what you do. You open the door on our lives and let this light shine through. and boy, do you help us to see. The light on your face you will take with you. All else, your sorrows, your joys, and all that you lay claim on, you will leave behind. The light on your face, that you will take.
Probably need this. Thank you for giving me permission to mess up. I'm Jerry Strobnicki, and I'm here, I think, because I'm the other character in the Ruby Dream. The straight man in a man and beast vaudeville act. You'll hear about that later. I was planning to use this time to present a list I've been working on, things that pissed off Jo Carson. I'll save it for later. It's already a long list, and maybe you can help me finish it over a beer. All I know is that I was on that list, frequently. And so were many of you. Show of hands. It's an honored place to be. I met Jo decades ago, but it was in 1998 in Bloomsburg. I was directing her Whispering to Horses, and she took me to dinner. She'd seen another work I'd done. She had a plan for me. She abducted me. She recruited me to the other side. Yeah. Pulled me away from the safe and orderly, fully trained world of professional theater into the world of community performance with amateur actors, site-specific non-theaters, no classic plays as a guide and goal. The world of theater of place. And from that dinner, she and I formed a kind of traveling vaudeville act. I don't know why she chose me, but she did. And so over and over again, in the deep south cotton fields, or with shrimp processors on the Georgia coast, or with miners, or moonshiners in corners of Appalachia, in places without Wi-Fi, or cell service, or card readers on gas pumps, or any food that wasn't brown. She was the playwright, and I helped to use her words to change lives and transform communities. And although the initial source was almost always a collected story from an interview or a story circle, the words in the script were her words. It was a script. She was a playwright. This was her craft. And yeah, the actors in community plays might paraphrase liberally. That's a whole other issue. But the heart, the soul, the framing was the work of a writer of the first order. The goal in this work is community transformation through art. But there is within this community work an intentional dishonesty, an intentional sleight of hand, a magic trick. We're aware of it and we do it on purpose. This team of professionals, and there are many of them here, conspired to create the community's own sense of its validation. And it is a true validation. It is often long delayed. We help them believe they can do it. We help them give them their own story and their own voice. And it's very powerful when it's achieved. But let me be completely clear. These communities that were the subject of her plays, these communities that benefited from this craft, these communities could not do it on their own. They could not have done it on their own. They needed this someone with the craft. And just so, despite what the Chronicle of Philanthropy might say, despite what the New York Times might say, what happened in places like Harlan and Colquitt and St. Mary's and Swatee, and so many other places where Jo wrote her plays, miracles of transformation happened. But these miracles of transformation happened because Jo Carson was a consummate playwright. Period. Oops, I just said that. I would avoid getting into the list of things that pissed off Jo Carson. Oh well. As a director, I engaged in the ironic and the oxymoronic. I use Jo's words to help whole communities believe in their own voices. It was really hard. Sometimes it was painful and disheartening, and it was hugely fun. It was the best and most meaningful set of adventures any artist could have. From Jo, I learned hands-on about framing and reframing, agency and artistry, and the inevitable battles between those two words, about authenticity and audacity, because these projects were and are simply impossible, and the more impossible, the better. Was that a time? Good. Like forensics. To Jo, using theater, using story to change lives wasn't theoretical or pie in the sky. It was real. It was as real as a handful of earth, and she could prove it. Jo wrote on agency and artistry and spider speculations. Now, the ethics of this reframing business can get tricky. Who am I to assume the right to reframe stories in which anger or pain is, to say the least, justified? Some squirrely, middle-aged white lady with barely enough knowledge about something to be messing with it. How do I assume the right to use such knowledge? I don't know, but the Dalai Lama tells us the human job of this world is finding and creating happiness, and a little arrogant artistry goes a long way. Jo's reframing, especially in her late plays, God, how pretentious does that sound? Academic. But let it be recorded that here in this room on this day was first used the phrase, the late plays of Jo Carson. Anyway, in her late plays, some of the reframings were really extreme. We had a lot of animals talking, and we had a lot of scenes taking place in the afterlife. And today might be a good day to think about a couple of those. Like at the Pearly Gates, Dakota, Bernice, and Carol Ann from Crooked Rivers, Sisters 3 in Camden County, where two murdered women meet their now deceased murderer at the Pearly Gates. It's a scene of meditation of grace and the ever-available potential for forgiveness. Or like the scenes in Purgatory, where Jimbo meets his horse cowboy at the Last Chance Bar and Grill, or the Last Chance Bar in Purgatory, from Headwaters, Birth, Death, and Places in Between in Saltinacucci, Georgia. And her co-writer, Jerry Grella, can recite all of that scene with the drop of a Stetson. Just ask. Or the image of the spirit cutting lunch buckets in the coal mine, a man we see go back after we've known him to be dead. But he's gone into the Black Damp Mine in a failed attempt to rescue his miners. So let me finish by reading Things to Say from one of my favorite Jo Carson community plays, Higher Ground, Playing with Fire, from Harlan County, Kentucky, 2009. You see this boss, who you know is dead, come in and he's cutting lunch buckets, which means he's stealing sandwiches from other people. He's looking for the best snack. He starts talking. You get in a cave-in or a dam or something, running out of air, and you know it, and you search your pockets for anything, a store receipt, anything to write on. And then maybe all you've got to write with is your own blood. So you say, I love you in blood. Because that's all you've got room for. Well, I've been thinking about that, and I've got more to say. To Elizabeth, my wife, you have been the making and the breaking and the breaking and the making of me. Time and again, I love you beyond what I can say. This language isn't big enough to say love. To my sons, James and Paul, and my daughter Melinda, I see myself in all three of you, my graces and my families. You are the very wheel of time as it turns for me. You are my life ongoing. Can a man love something better than his own life? Yes, he can. Our home, my work, the things I do, my can of beer. The Corvette I've spent a small fortune trying to make run right. I love them too. Not in the same way, but I love them too. Let me say this. I love this life that is my life. Might as well say it. I would like to die an old man in a comfortable bed. But however I go, I'm going to be a little afraid when that time comes. I guess everyone is. But I don't want fear and regret to be the only thing I'm feeling. I want to say this now. I have been blessed beyond what I can name or understand. I have loved and been loved. And I have been amazed. I have been amazed. Thank you. we were pissed off, how we pissed off Jo Carson. No, it's time to take some reading, or some either readings or memories, and we've got 9 minutes. We've got 6 minutes, 5. Let's start here. Should I bring you a microphone? Are you okay?
I'm an English teacher. Can y'all hear me? I met Jo Carson about 25 years ago and was blessed to spend about a year here in Johnson City documenting every burp and fart of the road company. And would go over to Jo's little house about weekly where we would, as she would say, talk art and life over large quantities of beer. And that's where I came to love Jo Carson. Came to see her about 3 weeks ago to say goodbye. And about 15 minutes before I came to Jo's and Al's house, I wrote this. And it's always a mistake to try to follow Jo Carson's voice, but there you have it. That's what I did. I won't tell you the title because you'll figure it out. Crazy ass, wild thing, the mad woman of Johnson City. They say she's deaf, but the fact is she hears better than you or me, because when you listen with the heart, ears are just decorative. The mad woman of Johnson City. She listens, and the stories waltz into her body, her beautiful mind, where she gives them a warm nest until they flap their ancient wings and fly from her pen, well, her computer, and soar like seagulls above the storm, the maddening of Johnson City. Stories have been her life, as they are for all of us, but she sees them for the beloveds they are and holds them close, so close, until they're time to sing. Like the would-be Patsy Cline belting in the basement. "Josephine, what are you doing down there?" "I'm singing." Reply the stories, and oh, how they do sing in the arms of the madman of Johnson City. She is known for stories throughout the South, if not the world, from Colquitt to Cumberland Gap, Saltee, Newport News, and Lancaster, Port Gibson, Mississippi, and alternate routes, and Alabama, and Johnson City. She is known for stories because she knows they are all hers and not hers. All ours. As she is all hers and all ours. Give her an itch, and she will find the bug what done it, and the salve what ease it. That's the story. That's always the story, even if we never really know how it turns out. Oh, the mad woman of Johnson City. She will live forever, this mad woman, because nothing can kill her, our stories. Not war, not pestilence, not floods, not small locked minds, not cancer and other uninvited guests. Nothing can end the story. So let us sing wild, crazy, unfettered by life or death, stringless kites, spelling as they spin the story called love. Let us sing the story of the mad woman of Johnson City.
This comment break, we have time for one more, but you've got another one coming up. So, all right.
My memory is linked to yours, because in my book, hands down, the definitive rendition of that song, Crazy, was by Jo Carson, because it is so beautifully off-key, and so beautifully great. I remain amazed. And I'm wearing Eugene, Jo Carson red.
Time's up, though. You did the story. help me out with this?
Like most of the songs performed today, this is one that we played for Jo. Actually, Rhodey Jane played it, and then I jumped in the last month.
I'm a pilgrim. Jo kept her wonderful sense of humor all the way. At the end, she said, I never thought I'd be an object of pilgrimage. And I'm having more fun today than the time the whole day with my twin brother and thinking about Jo watching this translator. Is she doing a wonderful job? Thank you.
Jo Carson changed my life, and not just a little. She chipped away at an old engineer and taught him the difference between truth and fact. In her world, truth could emerge from the mind of a bear, or a bowl of potato salad, or from a spider's bite. Her work was meant to be heard. She always said, meant to be spoken. But she was being modest. Her work was meant to be heard. And the hearer has to work as hard as the writer to dig out the truth. Facts lull the listener. Truth is harder to find. Entertainment, sure, but not at the expense of truth. She showed synchronicity to an unwilling engineer. How could mere coincidence explain the bear's late night visit to Jo's window when she had been agonizing for months about a bear's mind? It convinced Jo that she'd finally got it. Synchronicity continually showed up in Jo's life and mine. Take chaos, for an example. Independently pursued by both of us as a spur to creativity. Coincidence or synchronicity? Jo's humor was ever present. We've heard some of that. Showing up in her work and with her friends. As strong as her confounding stubbornness was when she got her head up. Jo was a master at framing events, turning them to truth by the way they were presented. Her final month was her masterpiece. Not a death march, but a celebration of life, her life. She framed it beautifully, with old friends repaying her for her impact on their lives. There was music and joy, stories and cuddling, giving and receiving. Above all, love. Jo said to me in the final week she had ignored advice from parent and friend alike throughout her life about her chosen way. She leaned over to me and said triumphantly, "I have no regrets, cousin. I have won."
Hi everybody, I'm Ann Kilkelly. I'm the person who tap dances. I never saw Jo tap dance. It's an act I will always regret having missed. I want to tell you what I think of as a funny and very strange story. I was writing and directing weekend detective stories in the park hotels in the state of Kentucky. And, well, I was between jobs at the time. And I was very anxious to get Jo Carson to act in the show I was doing, which was called Yowl. We had a beatnik theme that year. And Jo said no, she wouldn't act. She had quit that. She'd sworn it off since the time when we were rehearsing Georgella Lyons' play Braids. She launched us from the end of Act 1 directly into the middle of Act 2. This was 20 years ago, I think, and the last time I visited Jo, she reminded me that she didn't act anymore. So we had this story. I pushed to make her act, and she pulled against it, and I pushed some more, and finally she said that she would be in my show if I would let her sing. And I said, well, what was it you wanted to sing? She said, said, "You have changing heart." So given we had a beatnik theme, that it didn't make a lot of sense to me, but I said, okay, I'll try. This was kind of participatory weekend altogether, and many things happened that weren't anticipated. You had to sort of keep the guests and the players away from danger and also lead them to a conclusion that wasn't too obvious without hurting anybody and pretending to murder them. That was the size of it. We had activities like a talent show. We had a talk by a park ranger, Jack Gerard from Lexington. And he played a park ranger named Skipper, who gave a jewelry workshop based on nature, which involved gluing peanuts in the shell and sometimes pieces of salami onto leather straps and making necklaces and bracelets. So that's the tone of the thing. So Jo, I'm a detective, an insufferably arrogant and controlling detective named Scar Trace. And Jo played my ward. And I don't think she ever really quite liked the role. She was unnamed in the show. And she was helping me detect and helping me with my poem. She reminded me quite constantly